Last year we filled 4,401 roles. 2,700 of them roughly were people joining the organisation and 1,300 were people being promoted within the organisation.
You're hiring 6 or 7 people a day?
Yep, we are. So last year we reckon we've had over more than 250,000 people make an application into SSE to say that they kind of want to come and join us on this net zero journey.
Would you have any problem with somebody using ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is to help them shape their application?
Look, listen, I think AI is...
On this episode of the Clean Energy Pod, we'll learn what it takes to get a job in clean energy, what are the biggest mistakes candidates make, how to approach job interviews, and whether AI will help or hinder your chances of landing your dream role.
John, thanks very much for joining us on this podcast to discuss just how we speed up the transition to a clean energy system. Of course, key to that will be employing lots of people and making sure they have the right skills. And there's an awful lot of people who are interested in moving into this industry. I've seen one prediction saying in the next few years could be 12 million people or something globally operating in this industry. For those who don't know, just tell them what SSE is, the business, what it's in, and the size and scale of its operations.
Okay, thanks Raymond. So SSE, I mean, we effectively like to call ourselves the UK's clean energy champion, although we'd probably start to argue we've got ambitions to be Europe's clean energy champion and wider. Located predominantly in the UK and Ireland, but Southern Europe and also some activities in Japan as well. We're really about clean energy infrastructure. Did a strategic pivot a few years ago where we predominantly exited energy retail and decided to move into what I would call all the technologies that support net zero. And that's everything from on and offshore wind. We've got traditional hydro through to effectively the whole distribution and transmission system that transmits it. We've also got a bit of flexible thermal, which is important in order for us to kind of manage that clean energy thing. So significant player. We have grown over the last few years from about 9,000 employees back up to 14,000 employees. So really kind of started to see that growth coming through. And really quite exciting, we've got a net zero acceleration plan coming forward, which really sets out our vision over the next kind of 7-8 years, what we're going to deliver and how we're going to deliver it. So something that's good to see, but also allows us to really start to think about skills and jobs.
And that's a massive investment programme, something like £20 billion over the next 5 years. I think could be more than 40 billion over the next decade. So the company's spending an awful lot of money. It's in a growth phase.
Yep.
You are in charge of making sure it has the people that will enable that growth to happen.
Yeah.
That is a massive challenge. How do you even think about that kind of thing?
So we think about it in a number of different ways. I mean, first of all, we think about the starting point of having engaged employees in the organisation. The old adage, it's much easier to keep people than find new people. So we want to be really kind of stable in terms of listening to our employees, really creating a culture and environment, getting them behind the net zero stuff. So that's probably the starting point. Second bit is we have to be attractive as an employer. So we've done a lot of work in what we call our employee value proposition. That's making sure that we're competitive, and also that we're not just competitive in terms of benefits and so on, but that we can offer careers, career growth, development, learning and training. And then I think we really need to understand the markets that we're in, and we need to be really clear about whether we are buying skills, whether we're building them, whether we're borrowing them. So that whole kind of strategic workforce planning bit about trying to look out ahead and say, look, over the next 5 to 10 years, what do we really need in order to kind of execute this kind of strategic plan and vision, and how are we going to put together tangible plans to make that happen? So that's the kind of sort of stuff that we're working on at the moment.
So if somebody's thinking about moving into the clean energy industry,
Yep.
if they're either employed just now or maybe they're an apprentice or
Yep.
a graduate or something, what are the skills that you're looking for? You know, what do you need?
It's incredibly wide ranging. So it's everything. Clearly, we need commercial people. We need people that kind of have got business skills, whether that's about doing analysis on projects, or whether it's actually kind of into the analytical piece of looking at things like, you know, the wind resourcing in terms of how, you know, where do we site projects, what's the kind of wind factor, load factor that we're going to get for them. We need system designers to design it, and we need people to come in and do what I would call the kind of key craft skills as well, often the unsung heroes that will operate the networks, operate the kit, go out and effectively kind of keep things ticking over. So one of the things we pride ourselves on is that we've got a really kind of wide range of kind of skill sets. It's almost like if you're interested, have a look at our website. Our website, we pride ourselves, we pretty much advertise every type of role that we've got. On top of that, we go further. We're starting to look at kind of conversion programs. So one of the big ones is actually looking at, if we're going to go to low carbon properly, we need to make sure that high carbon doesn't get stranded. That means we need to look at what we call just transition. How do you manage that move? So a lot of focus on how do we help people out of things like oil and gas, which are probably maturing. How do we move them into, you look at their transferable skills and give them a little bit of support to move in. And then the other thing we're doing is in kind of adjacent sectors is we're giving people the opportunity to be retrained. So not only do we have lots of apprenticeship programs and lots of graduate programs, but we've started to embark on a series of what we would call adult trainee programs, where we're taking people that have got some core skills. They know how to work outside, they know how to maybe work in an environment like OpenReach or something like that, and we're giving them the opportunity to go on accelerated conversion programs to become jointers, to become linesmen, and I think it's a combination of doing all of these kind of things in order to kind of bring people in, because you talked about the numbers, Raymond. We're going to have to move at pace, so we have to be quite innovative. And
give me some numbers then. So you talked about the growth from, what did you say, 9,000 to 14,000?
Yeah, 9,000 to 14,000 over the last few years. I mean, how did that play out? Last year we filled 4,401 roles. 2,700 of them roughly were people joining the organisation, and 1,300 were people being promoted within the organisation. And that's a key bit. It can't just be about everybody joining. We need people to join and then see they've got a career path. We need them to stay, want to stay, think they can grow their careers. But then that means that's 2,700 people that we need to get into the ways of working, the culture of the organisation.
You're hiring 6 or 7 people a day.
We are, yep, we are. And if you think about that, that means that we need candidates to apply. So last year we reckon we've had over more than 250,000 people make an application into SSE to say that they kind of want to come and join us on this net zero journey. And if I go back a couple of years, that would have probably been 100,000 applications. So the interest there, and that's not happening by accident. That's about us being really open about the jobs. It's about us being able to create development opportunities, and it's about being able to kind of listen and understand what people are looking for.
Let's just spend a second on that now, because those numbers are enormous. So SSE had 250,000 people apply to work for the business.
Yes.
And you think it would probably been less than half of that a few years ago?
If you go back 4 or 5 years, probably less than half of that.
Is that because of the way the business has changed? Is much more focused now on clean energy than it was beforehand? Is it that the industry is more attractive, or is it that the business is more attractive?
I think it's a bit of both. I think people are focused on the industry, but anecdotally we hear people saying, look, you've got a really strong offering. There's a lot of people want to come and join you. So I think what happens, first of all, people make a values-based judgment about, do they want to be in this sector? And then our trick's to be able to try and stand out within that. So, if you're thinking about joining, and we see that if we look at graduates over the last couple of years, Raymond, I mean, last year, 199 graduates, the year before, 150, probably this year, close to 200 plus. I rewind 6-7 years ago, we probably had 20 graduates a year. So there's a significant investment in growth to create that opportunity. But then what you've got to do is you've got to look to be the employer of choice in that area, so you get the right skills and the right attractiveness and the right calibre.
And we hear quite a lot of discussion about renewables and clean energy, and it's not actually, are the jobs real? Are they happening? It sounds from what you're saying as if these are actual jobs. It's not a promise of jam tomorrow, it's happening today.
No, they're real, and I think they're sustainable, and I think that's one of the points we make when we look at, we've got an apprenticeship programme where we've got 440 trainees across the various businesses. We've got something like 34 different kind of apprenticeships on offer. And we make the point that these are sustainable jobs, that they're jobs that if you want to come, we're building and operating and maintaining long-term assets that last 25, 30, sometimes 40 years. That's a whole working career. So if you actually want to come and join, and you want to come on the journey, there's an opportunity to do that. And that's one of the points that we make. We're not a training factory that's kind of bringing in and getting hold of kind of cheap labour and then effectively passing it on to somebody else. We're training people for a need because we've got a long-term requirement for them.
How big a challenge is it for you and the team to recruit that number of people. I mean, it will boggle people's minds that you made 4,000 offers in just 1 year. How on earth do you manage to do that?
I think it's. I mean, we've tried to build. We've tried to build a strong brand. We've tried to build the offering. We run and we pride ourselves in effectively deciding to build an in-house recruitment engine. So 97% of the roles that we will fill through an internal team. We will use some specialist agency and we'll use some executive support where it's appropriate, but we pride ourselves in having an internal team that know the business, know the requirements, so that they can be pretty efficient in helping the whole process of advertising the role, screening for it, and then producing a short list to the business. They have to be quite joined up. We have to kind of look and say at times, should we be running campaigns rather than posting an individual role? So it's quite a lot of the time we'll kind of say, look, we actually think we need 100 of these. So we won't go out with 100 different adverts and 100, we'll put them together and we'll try and make sense of them. But it comes from really kind of having a look at it, and the recruitment team will be completely joined up with the team at Look at Employee Listening. So one of the things we introduced a couple of years ago was we started to survey people after they'd been in for 6 months. So we knew what all the exit data said, but the exit data, somebody's gone by then, so you can't do an awful lot with it. So we kind of started to say, if we're going into this growth mode, we really need to know whether it's sold as seen. We need to know whether people are, think what they've joined is what they've joined, think they're being well managed and led, like the values of the organisation. So we start to ask that question to just get something to kind of reinforce where are we at. Where do we need to kind of fine-tune things? Is that something about the employment offering? Is it something about how people are being led? Is that something about the culture? So there's a piece of trying to build the machinery to do it, and then I think there's a piece about trying to make sure that your retention levels are high, and that's one of the good things. In amongst this growth just now, our retention is probably as low as I've seen it. It's averaging about probably 5.5%, which is pretty good by any standard, I think.
Retention's 5.5. So
5.5. So that's effectively, we're losing for every 100 people in a year, we're losing 5.5%. And to me, that's not high. You need some retention because obviously people want to do something different. If you've got 100% retention, you're not getting any refreshment. You're not getting enough new ideas. So you need a bit of a balance of it. What you don't want is something so high that you can't get. By the time you get somebody in and trained, they've gone and you're having to start all over again. That's a bit of a false economy.
People think of clean energy and they'll think of people scaling wind turbines onshore or offshore, and they'll think of engineers, and they'll think of all these sorts of professions.
Yep.
But actually, are there wider roles that you're looking for? If you were thinking of what are the big buckets of roles that are in demand right now and will be in demand in years to come, what are they? So
there's a wide range of things. I mean, I think if you look at it at one level, project management is a big thing. The scale of some of the projects we're doing, the volume of the projects we're delivering in areas like transmission mean that we need project managers, we need project management teams. We've got technical stuff. We're into things like HVDC, which is kind of high voltage. In order to do that kind of stuff, we need to build teams. We need to increase the capability in that area. As we build out networks and reinforce them, we need a number of what I would call the kind of technical craft skills, whether that's jointers, whether that's linesmen in terms of stuff, and we need the modelers. We need people that can work out how we build, where we build routes, how we do the planning. We need people to go out and help with the consultation if we're going to build a big asset, whether it is a wind farm or whether it's a big transmission line. We need people that know how to engage and plan these routes, and it's really wide. I think that's one of the nice things. I think we have got some skills that we would say are more critical than others because there's less of them, and that is some of the stuff like the jointing and the HVDC and the project management. But when you look wider than that, I think one of the beauties of this is such a wide range of things that you can get involved in. If you've got a focus of actually wanting to make a difference, if you passionately believe in the whole net zero journey, it doesn't matter whether you're commercial, financial, whether you're like myself in kind of HR or training, whether you're into planning. There's such a wide range of things that you can get involved in, and that's one of the kind of beauties of an organisation of this size.
And you talked earlier on about helping people transition from high carbon oil and gas roles into low carbon roles. Is it important that you have an energy background? Or actually, are you, given the scale of recruitment, having to reach into people with a whole variety of different backgrounds?
we're having to more and more. If you think about us as as a kind of a asset owner and operator, we're having to look at adjacent. So the obvious kind of areas which are kind of similar, both railways and water. So if you're in railways and water and you've managed big intensive capital projects, you've got transferable skills. I think what we're finding in oil and gas is that we originally thought that we would probably have to do what we kind of call conversion programs. We found that's less the case. I would more call them orientation. So you look at something like Beatrice, which is one of our JV offshore wind farms. Most of the control room in Wick have come out of oil and gas. They haven't needed significant retraining in order to do that. They've needed a little bit of orientation into the difference in the sector in terms of stuff, but an awful lot of the time we're able to move people across that have got broadly transferable skills, and we're finding that they need less retraining than we actually thought in terms of stuff. And a good example for us, what we would almost say is if you've worked in, if you've worked in more than one area or one sector, you're giving us that indication that you've got the transferable skills and you've got agility. So sometimes that's what we'll look for. It's less a concern about whether you have managed a project in the energy sector. If you've managed one successfully in water and you've also done something somewhere else as well, that will give us a view that you've got that transferability.
Great, right. So you convinced me if I'm in an outside energy, I'm going to go and apply to join the business. Give me some tips on successfully getting a job in the clean energy sector then. So what do I need to do? Give me some actionable tips that will help get me considered.
Yeah, so I think first of all, you've got to know the organisation. So, whenever you apply, make it clear that it's not something, completely generic. Tailor your application to say why that organisation and what you think that you bring to it. Think about the transferability of the skill set. Think about whether you're lined up to the organisation's values. And I think when you apply and then if you come for interview, be ready to kind of discuss, how you're going to make an impact. What is it you want to do here? What is it you think you bring? I think it's always useful to think about what are the one or two differentiators that you think you offer that somebody else doesn't. And then I think the other bit is being realistic. I think I would always say, don't claim you can do something you can't, because I think people will find that out either pretty quickly in the application or the interview or when they take up some references. So I think be honest about what you can bring, and if you've got one or two gaps, I think that's fine. I don't think we're looking for in a period of fast growth. We're not looking for, if we list 5 or 6 things, we're looking for an honest view. If you can do 3 or 4 of them well, you say. If you think 1 or 2 of them you're learning and one you've never tried, I think we would ask people to just be open and honest about that. We've really tried to, over the last few years, simplify the application process as part of the growth. So we try to only ask for what we need, and we try to really talk about the top 5 or 6 things rather than a list as long as your arm, or start saying you need 15 years experience and you need 2 degrees and whatever. We're trying to be very realistic. So the other comment would be, look at the role, read it and say, look, okay, do I think I could do most of that? Would this be a reasonable and sensible application? If I was shortlisting it, would I shortlist myself for it or not? And that's the kind of sort of thing, and that helps you think about what you should apply for, and then helps you think about, look, where you've got the gaps. Be honest, but also explain how you think you can take steps to bridge some of them.
So don't pretend you have all the skills if you don't have all the skills.
Don't. And I think when things are fast growing, be honest about what you bring to it. Be honest. If you bring more than some of what we're asking for, say that. And if you bring a little bit less in some areas, just be upfront about it.
What are the common mistakes you find from applicants who maybe aren't successful?
I think one of them is what I would call the scattergun approach. So, we've got an applicant tracking system. If you apply, we can see, if you're applying to 1 or 2 roles, we can see that you're probably a serious candidate that's thought about it. If you apply for 32 roles at the same time, that sets the alarm bell off, because we're like, well, we're not sure that you know what you're doing, and these are really different roles. So, either you've got an incredibly wide skill set, or you're being quite you're being quite scattered in what you're doing. So my view is often less is more, I think, in terms of stuff. Be open about why you're applying, be open about what you can bring to it. I think sometimes as well, be honest on geography. We try and be really open about the bulk of our roles. We'll say we're willing to talk flexible, we'll be flexible in base, but some roles can't be, and we'll be really open and say that role's got to be based in that area because of. I think what you don't want to do is get somebody down to a final interview and then they say, oh, I can't base myself there, because that's not fair on the organisation. It's also not fair on all the other candidates in the process. So my view is always be straightforward, be targeted in your approach, and be open and honest in the way through it.
Now, one thing that's developed in the last year or so, I'd be interested in your view, is AI, for instance. Yep. So are you seeing lots and lots of very similar job applications all of a sudden because they're written by AI? Or actually, how big would you have any problem with somebody using ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is to help them shape their application? What are your thoughts on that?
I think if it's helped, I mean, one of the best hints or tips I was given about AI was to kind of treat it like an intern. So what you wouldn't do is you wouldn't ask an intern to go and do something that was key for you and then pass it straight in without checking about it. So I think AI's got a place to kind of, if somebody was applying and they were saying, what are the key attributes for that kind of role, my view is AI might give them, at this stage of it, if they're looking for top 10, it might give them 6 or 7. But then there'll be 2 or 3 missing. So I think you've still got to do the research. If you're actually going to put in a good application or prepare well for an interview, AI will help you. It'll help you on the way, but it won't give you all of the answer. You've still got to be a little bit savvy, do some of your own research. So I think AI complements the process. But I think if you decide that AI will run the process for you, that's not going to work. And I think my view would be when you get to interview and discussion, you'll get found out if you've not done some of the homework. But to use it as a prompt, or in old terms a study tool, I don't think it's a bad thing to say, what should I be thinking about? You use AI to ask the question, I'm thinking of applying to an energy business, what should I be thinking about? What are the kind of things I should be getting ready to talk about? What are the kind of questions I might want to answer? I think it can help with the prep. It's probably almost like a good coach to do that. But you have to do more to get match fit yourself. You can't just rely on it on its own.
You've also, I know, been doing quite a lot to try and get people who are maybe out of the workforce at the moment, particularly women who might want to return to work, and get them involved in what is a big growth industry. That's probably a massive issue that doesn't get talked about very much. So how did that come on your radar, and what are you actually doing about it?
So it came on our radar. I mean, I think when you talk about what we need to do, we have to be trying to get hold of the widest possible talent pool that we can get to. And that means everything from us. It means everything from, are we balanced on social mobility? Are we balanced on kind of long-term unemployed? And we've got programs to help with that, as well as obviously all the training programs where we need to bring in skills. And what we can't do with the skills is not actually have grown them. We can't just be buying skills off others and leaving everybody short. I think we've got a bit of an obligation. The returner program came out of that to kind of actually say, look, there are a lot of women that have been in STEM. They may well have come out because they want to be carers. They may well have chosen to have a change of career, and we've partnered through trade unions and through employment organisations to kind of get some of that back. I'd like us to do more. I mean, I think it's probably, we can only go as fast as we can identify and partner with organisations to bring STEM returners in. But what we found is typically we'll offer people 6 or 12 months as a pilot to come back in, see if it's right for them, see if they can catch up with the technology. Sometimes they've maybe been out of the workplace 5 or 10 years. Can they catch up with the technology? It's got a really good success rate. It's got a good hit rate of actually people coming in, getting back up to speed, and the organisation wanting to keep them. So it's a programme, we would like to do more of it, but what we're relying on is we're relying on others to help us identify and tap into that market, because by its nature, the STEM Returner programme, people aren't usually actively in the jobs market. It's just they kind of start to get involved in an initiative or discussion about saying, I think I might like to get back into it. And then you've got agencies or organisations trying to encourage them to say, well, is it STEM you want to get back into? Is it something else? And if it's STEM, then we can offer a real interesting proposition.
Great, thank you very much. When we're thinking about the growth that we've talked about, not only for SSE as an individual company, but actually for the industry, adding millions and millions of people on globally, what for you is the biggest challenge in that issue?
I think the biggest challenge, probably at the pace we're going at, is how we get the supply chain there alongside us. And I think the issue is there's a lot of skill sets where, potentially there's not enough skills in the UK alone. I think we also have to recognise that not everybody wants to joint cables or climb towers. You know, there's a lot of people want to be in things like IT, and as you've mentioned AI earlier, there's a lot of people want to be in that. So our biggest issue is trying to be as attractive as we can, but then being realistic. If we can, you know, there's two comments. We can only grow, if you look at all the trainees we bring in, we can only grow the amount of trainees where we've got willing mentors to mentor them, because, you know, from a safety point of view, a training point of view. So we're kind of constrained. If you think about it, the supply chain will be constrained in the same way. So I think there's a degree of being honest and innovative and kind of saying, if we have to go either create new pipelines, if we have to create joint training programs, if we have to kind of go overseas because we've got skill shortages, we have to be realistic about that. And I think all of that's in the mix. I mean, we talk to the supply chain, we have the debate. I think the ideal world would be, you know, we create lots of jobs and everybody local wants to do these jobs, but we also have to plan for the scenario that there's not, you know, there's more demand than supply. And so then we have to think about, well, where could we, you know, who have got like-minded systems, where could we train, could we create a compelling enough proposition that the people want to come over and work for a period of time. So that's in the middle of it, and we just have to make sure that we're kind of working with each other rather than against each other, because if you get that balance wrong, then the danger is, you know, you turn into being the training school and then somebody else kind of pays a little bit more and takes everybody at the end of it. So it's going to require kind of coordinated and mature and open approach, I think.
So the biggest challenge, therefore, is across the industry rather than just for one company. What's the biggest opportunity? Because you've talked about just the level of applicants, 250,000. I mean, for an HR professional, is this a good problem to have? And, you know, how big an opportunity is this?
I think it's a good problem. I mean, I think, you know, if you kind of look at it, and I'm not going to say it doesn't have challenges. I think managing growth is far more positive than kind of managing shrinkage. But you have to make sure that you're growing in the right way. You've got to make sure that you're attracting and retaining people. The more new people that are in, the more people maybe don't quite know how to navigate around the organisation. You've got to work out how you reinforce the culture of the organisation. You've got to check, because cultures are dynamic, you've got to check that the culture's moving in the way that you want it to move and isn't inadvertently moving in a different way. So I think what I call the growing pains are something that has to be challenged. Obviously the challenge that you've got with that number of applicants is we're not going to give everybody a role. So what we've got to do is give them an experience where they want to apply again and they're willing to advocate for us, because so that bit about actually trying to make sure that the end-to-end process and experience feels okay, that people feel that if they haven't quite been selected, they kind of understand why and they've got the opportunity to kind of go again is important. Because, you know, you could quite easily, if you created quite a lot of bad experiences, that number could drop quite quickly. And what we know, you know, over the next 10 years is we need a real decent pipeline of talent wanting to come to us. So we have to create that right experience, and not just the employment experience, but what I would call the candidate experience, which is about when you apply to when you join, which might take a bit of time, you know, making sure that we've got the right feedback loops and people feel supported.
John, thank you very much.
Thanks, Raymond.